Hello, did you know that SMEs contribute 50% to our nation's GDP and SMEs employ 70% of our total country's workforce? However, SMEs die at an alarming rate of 50%. It is for these reasons that we have created the Enterprise Show to discuss issues around SME survival, SME scalability, and SME growth. Are you an entrepreneur? Do you think you are not being heard enough? Follow us on all our social media handles and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be part of the Enterprise Show. I am your host, Kemfon. You're welcome to another episode of The Enterprise, brought to you by Nectar Studios and the Akwa Ibom State Ministry of Trade and Investment. This is the show where we talk about businesses and help SMEs and startups to grow and scale. So if you're an SME, you are a startup, this is the show to be glued to. And today I have a very good friend of mine, Xavier Akpan of Savvy Photos. Welcome to The Enterprise.
Thank you very much.
All right, great to have you. Come on, you're going to speak up so we have some fun here today.
Yeah.
You have been in business for how long, sir?
I think 6 years now.
For 6 years. All right, so walk us through your process. How did you start? How did you get to this point?
Okay, I think first of all, I said I would just taking pictures for fun here. And a period through it, I was doing it with a cousin of mine. Then a period through it, we decided, okay, we need to do something different. I set out goals, and I figured I needed to do this for the long run.
Yeah. All right, so have you been working in this 6 years as a single photographer, or do you have a full studio where you're doing your thing with your team? How have you built
I started off freelancing.
Okay.
So I was working from home, and then when I had extra jobs, I would get to hire rent studio space and shoot from there. Then at some point I figured that I needed to grow past that. Then I set out to get an office space, so get up a studio and then move from there.
All right, so let's move on. The crux of this episode of The Enterprise is funding, raising funds, right? So how did you walk us through your process? How did you raise funds for Savvy Photos? How did you bring all the money together and buy the big equipments? Because we understand that one of the major complaints you hear from startup photographers are the equipments are expensive, getting a MacBook, getting the speed light and all of those things. How did you raise the funds to do all of that?
Okay, so I think I moved different from how every other person moved. So first of all, I moved trying to get the knowledge side of it first, right? So I can remember there was the time I did not have a camera, but I was paying for workshops. Okay. Right? So I started off going for workshops without having camera to even shoot with. So I knew I could rent the camera, I knew I could rent the laptop for the work, but I just knew that if to know how to handle it, I needed to have the knowledge. So I invested in the knowledge, and I knew that at a very early stage, I also knew that if I had the knowledge, it was easier to collaborate with anybody who had the equipment. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the equipment first.
So at the first, for me, I think I said I moved different. Yeah. For me, it was not the equipment first.
So at the point where you needed to get the equipment, how did you raise the funds to do that?
So when I had the knowledge side of it, all right, so I make sure the work speaks for itself. So it's like every other person referring to Savvy was referring to Savvy as a guy doing a good job. Nobody bothered if I had equipment to do the good job, all right? And I know, so I kept my price where I knew my price should be, all right? So I get the menial jobs, and the more those menial jobs, I would use them to buy the little equipment. It's like photography equipment that are quite relatively expensive. I mean, you know what they say, cost is relative. It's like what is expensive to you would not be expensive to me, and that's fair. Yeah. But the photography equipment, trust me, they are relatively expensive. It's like one small bag of photography equipment costs about 3 million naira, which doesn't make sense because that's somebody's office.
Okay, so you got the equipment. It was more like bootstrapping. You got your clients, and your clients paid for.
Yeah, they paid for. So the least I paid. So I remember one time we had a corporate session, and then we shot about 30 people, and we could not rent one particular thing, and that was a C stand. The C stand is like a clamp like this where you hang the light on. So I noticed that if we had a problem, the light was not consistent for the first day of the shoot because the guys handling the light, sometimes they bend it over and then they put it in. You can't set them at an angle and leave them like that. So I knew that was necessary to get. So the next day I asked them, okay, this should just be the remaining balance, and they paid. And then I sent the money straight up to get that particular equipment. You understand? And I feel like that's really, really how I built through, because I don't advise that. Like, I'm not a fan of bank loan.
Okay.
Yeah, I know I have friends who do bank loans and it does work for them, but I just figured it does. I don't know how it works for them because I also know the demerit of it. All right. So I think the best thing to do as an entrepreneur setting out at the very instant of it is that you make money from the business, invest back to the business.
Yeah. So before we even get to talk about loan, walk me through other ways you think that entrepreneurs, because from what you have said, you haven't raised funds from any external source,
No.
really. But what other ways do you think, in retrospect, that if you were to raise funds, you would raise to fund Savvy Photos? Because as I understand it, as entrepreneurs would say, you need a lot of money when you want to scale. So starting, you may not need so much money, but at the point where you want to scale, you need
But
money.
I do feel like the hardest part of it is actually starting.
Oh,
Yeah, I do feel that the hardest part of it, you know how they say that you use money to chase money. So at the stage of it where somebody you are quite excited about a particular sphere and then you want to get into it and then you're thinking, where do I get money? So I feel like that's the hardest part because once you start building business, there is a thing like a trust card which you earn from people, all right? So you build business and people start to depend on your integrity. Oh, he's been doing business for a while, he has a good name on this, yeah, he has a good name and that we can tread on that, all right? But that beginning side, I feel like that's the hardest. All right, so now say if I want to get funding for a particular project, I would rally around friends or rally around people who would trust me with their money. All right, maybe with interest and payback on a certain date, which it's easier now compared to actually starting out.
Okay. So there's no beyond loans and beyond your friend and more or less like the crowdfunding. What other ways do you think are open to photographers or to business people generally? Because you're not just a photographer, you're an entrepreneur as well. As I understand it, Savvy Photos, the Savvy brand has a lot of branches coming up soon.
Yeah.
So what other ways do you think that young entrepreneurs can raise fundings for their business?
I first of all stand with crowdfunding. But
Okay.
crowdfunding, not the major sense of crowdfunding. There's another phase of crowdfunding that feels like you go into the internet, open a crowdfund account, and people get fund you from that. I would do a crowdfunding in a different way. I will find a circle of friends, all right, a circle of trustworthy friends of mine, and then I will gather them up together. Said, okay, so I have a tax, I have a project, social project I need to get on, and this is the yield, and the yield probably would take a little longer to come, but I need to get it earlier the better. All right, if you trust me with social amount of money, like the barest minimum, the social amount of money. With so time, I would pay back. Most times, I don't even go that saying payback. It's like the money is too small to even think of paying back. I feel like everybody wants to be part of a journey. I feel like so you tell them about the stories, tell them about the dream, how glamorous the end products will be. I feel like everybody would want to invest on that. So
So crowdfunding.
But in a different way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crowdfunding from friends and maybe from family.
Yeah. So and then there's another part of it. It feels like so. For I feel like entrepreneurs, before you scaling a business, there's always a problem. The problem is majorly a problem of funding. Sometimes you overfund, sometimes you underfund. You overfund most times. If you come into business with money at the early stage of it, you are definitely going to overfund because it's like sometimes you overfund. And overfunding is also a big problem, like underfunding.
Oh, okay. So we've gotten crowdfunding. Which other way would you think is good for entrepreneurs to raise money?
I just feel like you should make from the business and invest back into the business. I'm not really that outsourced guy. Like I know people know a lot about bonds, getting bonds or angel investors or all those. But I feel like like you used to say, like in these days of hostile takeover of businesses, you bring in somebody at the early stage of the business where you're trying to navigate a lot of all those. You have a dream for the business. It's like if someone puts that much of money into their business, I mean, they should have a major say in that business. And the case about me is that I don't want to wake up one morning and said, "Oh, this was the dream," and somebody else is saying, "No, it can't be. You can't do it that way." All right. I feel like one thing entrepreneurship does is like it gives you the wings to fly. So I just want to enjoy the fact that I'm flying. Do you get?
Even if you're flying alone?
No, I don't think it's like even if I'm flying alone, so far as I'm flying to where I knew I was going to fly to.
Okay. So what's your thoughts around equity investments? So, for instance, I want to come into Savvy Photos and I have the money, and Savvy Photos needs the money. So I invest my money for a certain percentage of Savvy Photos. Is that something you think young entrepreneurs should be open to per time? Yeah.
That's a very, very vital topic. And I feel like first of all, you have to really understand where the business is before you bring in equity investor.
Okay.
You have to understand where the business is going the next 10 years. All right. So, not cutting it, but taking it up back to the case of what's it called, venture capitalist.
Yeah.
There's actually I read, I think, Harvard review or so, where they had a problem with venture capitalists putting so much money into businesses because they had a peak trend period and they lost their money. It's like people would buy into whatever you bring up so far as you make the story glamorous, right? But you have to be sure, is this really the long run? Where do you want to go? It's like I said earlier, it's like I don't want somebody come back tomorrow and said I can't make this particular decision because his money is here, and it really means I have to close up on that business, go start something else. It just depends on the contract. But I'm really not an advocate of all other forms of investment, and I feel like you should grow a business to a point where you actually know why you need to scale and where you are scaling to before you bring in people.
Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the kind of funding you like. Grow the business and make the money and then put it back into the business. Does this theory work for every kind of business?
I don't think it does work for every kind of business, but for photography, for me, it works. And I'm going to a different business now. I don't know how that would work for that particular business, but I'm just going to try. All right. So when I said make money from the business, invest back into the business, doesn't sound like I'm saying you make 10 million naira from the business, invest back 10 million naira in the business. That's really not what I'm saying. I feel like you make 10 million. If the business, you find a business that gives you 10 million, I feel like if you invest back 5 million into the business, you should see a valuable sign of growth. I feel like
okay, really so make the money and throw it back into your business, and for you that's the easiest way.
I feel like
best way to raise money.
Maybe not the best way.
Oh, okay.
But that it worked for me for years now, and I feel like that's fair for me.
Okay, so how do you manage? Let me just go into Savvy Photos a little bit. How do you manage, or how did you manage when you started out? How did you manage getting these monies that sometimes were not even sufficient to rent all the equipment? How did you manage that with paying the people who were coming alongside to help you? How did you manage the payments? Did you just work with what you had, or you had some sort of support from anywhere else?
I didn't just work with what we had on the table. Like sometimes you have salaries at the early stage of the business, like you have salaries coming in, and then people are not being paid, right? And the business just did not make much for that month. And I would go to friends, solicit for loans, which were with like minimal interest rate. Some of them I offered the interest rate I would have gotten without interest rate, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll pay them up while we wait for. It's like that's the drought period of the business. And what you don't want to know is that you don't want to bring the staff in that journey. That's your dream. If whatever happens there, it happens with you. So you don't want to bring people in. So I'll get money from other source, and then I'll pay them while we just wait for the right period.
So walk me through how you have managed your staff, or how you manage your staff when the money is not coming in. What do you say to your staff when the money is not coming in and it's the 28th of the month?
You know,
what do you say to them?
Very sensitive talk. So we have this period where it was coming like deadlines. We had jobs on deadline, and then money was not forthcoming.
Yeah.
And I now know, like, guy, an office feels, I don't know if it happens to every other entrepreneur, but for me it's like I get to the office and I feel like you don't want to see people's faces sad. It's like you want to, like, it's near and it's past time and you're supposed to do something about it. So at first I will maybe role play, not acting like there's nothing wrong. It's like everything is going to be, because you have to have that charismatic aura. It's like everything is going to be fine the next moment. And then when it does too bad, I'll just sit everybody down. It's like, can we talk? So you've seen your books so far. I think we know exactly where we are.
Does it work? When you talk to them, does it work?
Yeah, it does work. It feels like you bring at that point, it feels like they are not just, they feel like they want to hear from you sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes everybody, they have fair share, like they have fair understanding. They want to hear from you. But sometimes as an entrepreneur, that's hard. It's like ego bruising. How do I get back, talk to my staff? It's like, how do I bring it and say there is no money? It's like, that's not how we talked about this at first.
All right. Thank you very much, Sabi. But before you go, can you give me one thought that you think every young entrepreneur, everybody who is starting out, needs to have at the back of their mind before plunging into any business of any kind?
That's deep. No matter the stats you look up on the internet about that particular business, it's not going to be your experience.
Oh, statistics will always fail you.
It
So
will
your
not be.
experience is different from the statistics
So
you
you
see
just get
online.
into the business because you are convinced that you are going to you're going to do the right thing about it. But don't go on start saying I get into this. Everybody see the lowest earner in this particular field is so. I don't think you might be the lowest. So just get in with the mindset that this is the right thing to do and I'm going to do it regardless.
All right. Thank you very much, Savio Akpan of Sabi Photos,
Thank you
for
very
being
much.
on the enterprise. This is the size of the enterprise for today. Remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, our YouTube channel. Thank you very much, guys.
Hello, did you know that SMEs contribute 50% to our nation's GDP and SMEs employ 70% of our total country's workforce? However, SMEs die at an alarming rate of 50%. It is for these reasons that we have created the Enterprise Show to discuss issues around SME survival, SME scalability, and SME growth. Are you an entrepreneur? Do you think you are not being heard enough? Follow us on all our social media handles and subscribe to our YouTube channel to be part of the Enterprise Show. I am your host, Kemfon Decade.